走进纽交所，直击华尔街。本周市场关注的焦点集中在即将于6月13日举行的美联储议息会议上。目前，华尔街普遍预期美联储将在本次会议中维持利率不变，然后根据经济数据的情况来决定是否在7月份重启加息的步伐。在经济数据方面，根据周四美国劳工部公布的数据显示，截至6月3日当周，美国出请失业救济金的人数升至了26.1万人，这超出预期的23.5万人。该数值也跃升至了2021年10月份以来的最高水平，这显示出劳动力市场有放缓的迹象。在焦点个股方面，科技巨头苹果公司于6月5日的发布会上推出了一款名为 Apple Vision Pro 的头戴式设备。苹果公司的首席执行官 Tim Cook 表示，该设备可以无缝融合现实世界和数字世界。该产品将于2024年上半年在美国进行发售。那么，苹果公司的这款虚拟现实头戴式设备 Apple Vision Pro 将如何影响该公司的股价以及科技股整个板块的股价？另一方面，美联储即将于6月13日至14日所举行的会议，将继续加息的步伐，还是跳过6月份进行观望？在纽约当地时间6月8日，直击华尔街栏目邀请到 TJM Investments 的董事总经理 Tim Anderson 先生来谈一谈本周美股的走势以及下半年他对美股市场的展望。Hi, Tim.
Good morning, and it's so nice to be with you today.
Thank you so much for attending the conversation. We're really glad to have you here again. Welcome. Okay, so let's get started with the first question, which is about Apple. So Apple just announced their first ever virtual reality headset called Apple Vision Pro, which retails for almost $3,500. The price is very high. So what impact does this have on the Apple stock, and what impact does this have on the overall tech sector?
Well, in terms of Apple stock, it was very much anticipated without knowledge of the details, of course. So a lot of it was what we say in the stock. The stock had a very nice move, traded pretty much to all-time highs, just above 180, just below that $3 trillion valuation, which a lot of people are like, that will be a big headline day when it gets there. And I think what it had a very large impact on a few select companies in the market. Unity Software, which is letter U, was one of them because it was announced that they have kind of now a little bit of a joint venture with Apple to come up with some products that will facilitate the launch of this product, which won't come out till early next year. Right. Now let's talk about the price for a minute, just because the price is very fascinating. And I think what people have to realize is that the price it's not really priced initially for your average retail buyer. Clearly $3,500 is a hefty price, but all the developers will buy it. The app developers will buy it, and then there'll be a smattering of people that I just have to have it, I don't care what the price is. But really, go back to when the very first iPhone came out in 2008. This was when we had Motorola flip phones and things, and this phone was a very revolutionary product. And the initial price was $800, and people were just astounded at that point in time. Who on earth would ever spend $800 for a phone? Well, we didn't know at the time what apps were, and we didn't know that the phone was designed to have all sorts of interactive apps on it, but all the software developers that were going to be making apps bought it. They might have bought 2 or 3 of them because they knew that they were going to make hundreds of times more that through putting their apps on Apple's phone. I think it's a similar situation with this. I think all of the software developers, individuals as well as little niche companies that work with Apple, are going to buy a few of these at the price regardless of what it is, because they'll still make a ton of money off it.
So it's a revolutionary product, just like the iPhone when it was first launched in 2008, because it was the first ever smartphone.
Yes, I believe that will be the case. Clearly, we won't see exactly what it revolutionizes the most for a year or two. It's not going to come out till early next year.
The next question is about S&P 500 because we all noticed S&P 500 performed very well in the past week, and it almost reached its bull market territory. It's the highest point since August 2022. So what is the driving force behind this?
Okay, so we had obviously a big run for a few weeks now in a lot of these AI or artificial intelligence related stocks. And now what we've seen this week, particularly just at the very end of last week and early this week, is that rally has broadened out significantly to a lot of cyclicals. Some of the bank stocks have lifted off depressed levels. They had some issues, obviously, and some growth stocks away from just those AI, high beta, super growth tech stocks. So the other part of the market that's acted extremely well is the small caps. And the Russell 2000 has had a very good move. And I think that with some of the fears that we've been hearing about almost for a year now that a recession is inevitable, at one point in time a recession was inevitable in the first quarter of this year, and it didn't quite happen. And then in the beginning of this year, we were inevitably going to have a recession by late in the second quarter or the third quarter, and it's not happening yet. Okay, so now I think people are feeling, you know what, maybe this isn't going to happen. We're coming up to the end of the first half of the year for portfolio manager performance numbers. And then these portfolio managers, because the amount of money under management is so big in the market, they have to decide now how they want to be positioned for the second half of the year, which starts in 3 weeks. So they are buying more than just the AI stocks right now because they're saying, you know what, if this recession doesn't happen and I'm underinvested and all of a sudden 3 weeks into July I'm behind, it's going to be not a good scenario for my performance numbers in the second half.
So you just mentioned, like right now we're standing in June, we're like 3 weeks away from the second half of this year. So just looking ahead, which sectors or industries should investors pay specific attention to for the second half of the year?
I really think you have to pay attention to the stocks that are acting the best right now.
Tech sector.
And the reason for that is the portfolio managers that manage billions and billions of dollars, they can't wait till July to start buying the stocks that they think are going to outperform in the second half, because they have to accumulate such large positions for it to really move the needle on their performance. They have to be positioning now. The same way in the fourth quarter, they have to be positioning in November and December for what they want their positions to be going into the rest of the year. So the a lot of the cyclicals, a lot of the heavy equipment stocks, a lot of the industrials, and certainly tech. But now tech, the last 2 or 3 days has cooled off a little bit, although it hasn't necessarily corrected a lot. So I think that people are still holding those positions in tech, and at some point in time they'll add to like the big names that drove the tech rally in the second quarter. But they're also broadening out what they're buying. Even some of the financials have come off depressed levels from the issues they had earlier in the quarter. Yeah. But now the one area that I think there's still a lot of caution on is retail. Okay? Now, some retailers will be okay, but there's a lot of concern that when this student loan funding, these student loan payments that have been deferred since the middle of COVID for probably close to 2.5 years now, when people start making payments again, a lot of consumer discretionary stocks, like maybe some restaurants, maybe some retailers other than the high end, maybe some consumer discretionary related stocks for people in their 20s and 30s might take a little bit of a hit. So I think that area will still have a lot of caution to it.
Thank you so much. So the last question is about the Federal Reserve's June's meeting, because we know they're going to have their meeting next week, which is June 13th and 14th. Do you think they will hike, skip, or stop the interest rate?
I think that we've seen the last hike. Okay, I have a very strong feeling that they hiked for
10 times.
over a year,
Yeah.
and I think that we've seen the last hike. I know that everybody's talking about this. Well, they're going to skip a meeting and then they're going to hike again in July.
Yeah.
I find it inconceivable that they are going to pause for just one meeting and then hike again the next meeting. I just think that sends a real mixed message. Then what are investors supposed to think after the July meeting? Are they going to say, well, now are they going to hike every other meeting? Or now is it just like a wild card? Now, a lot of it will depend on what the economy looks like in 6 weeks before the July meeting, but I just would be very surprised to see them pause, which I'm very sure they're going to do next week, and then hike in July, the last week in July. That just makes no sense to me.